All right, welcome everybody to today's outside event. We are recording this talk, so please mute yourself and stay muted until we get to the Q&A time at the end. You can also type any questions you might have for our speaker in the chat box throughout the talk. Jeremy Frank is a sophomore data science major here at Purdue, and he is also vice president of Purdue Sports Analytics Club. He has had some really interesting opportunities because of his love for baseball and data science. And Purdue did podcast interviews with him and wrote up articles about him. And I think you're really going to enjoy hearing about his interest and his experience. So please join me in welcoming Jeremy.
Cool, thank you. Before I start, my Wi-Fi is really bad right now, so if I cut out, just yell at me and tell me to repeat what I just said. So I'm Jeremy Frank. Two of my interests are baseball and statistics. Like you all, I go to Purdue, and like Ellen mentioned, I'm a sophomore studying data science. So if you're at least a little familiar with the game of baseball, these pictures are probably a little bit familiar to you. Maybe you collected baseball cards of your favorite players as a kid, or noticed a box score in the newspaper one day. For decades and decades of the sport's history, coaches and fans alike use this information to evaluate players and make sense of the game they love. Recently, though, the game has changed. Like many other industries, people in baseball have been looking for more innovative ways to gather information and use it to improve their bottom line. The key to success? Data science. Data science is how we got from here to here. So how have teams learned to use data science to their advantage in baseball? After all, the game is still being played on the field. Yet increasingly, the tools being used to win games are no longer bats and gloves, but rather Python and R. The key lies in asymmetric information. Every time a team has a metric, algorithm, or tool that another team doesn't have, they gain an edge in assessing team value and improving team performance. For over a century, coaches relied on extremely basic statistics, if any, to evaluate their players. Home runs, strikeouts, stolen bases. These indicators helped to measure past performance, but did little else. Some managers refused to use statistics at all, instead relying on an eye test and gut feelings to steer their club. During this time, nobody thought that statistics could be used to get an edge. Much of this changed with Moneyball, a strategy pioneered by Oakland A's general manager Billy Beane in the early 2000s. Billy Beane had a problem. He had some talent on his team, but his payroll wasn't large enough to compete with big market teams like the New York Yankees. Beane needed to find players that were likely to outperform their market value. He did this by emphasizing statistical analysis to acquire players with traits that other teams were undervaluing. While nothing that Beane did would be regarded as particularly advanced in today's game, he put together an incredibly successful baseball team and convinced the rest of the league that they too could use advanced stats to get an edge. What happened in the next 2 decades was an arms race for information. Teams began to use each bit of information they could about a player to assess their value and predict their performance. With the introduction of StatCast in 2015 came another revolution for baseball and data. StatCast is a high-speed, high-accuracy tracking system that provides mountains of data for each split second during a game. This massive data file can be used to evaluate the velocity, angle, and success probability of every pitch, swing, and catch on the field. In order to make sense of this massive information, teams are increasingly turning to data wizards rather than baseball traditionalists to run their franchises. Today, nearly half of all top decision makers for MLB teams are Ivy League graduates, while less than a quarter of them are former players themselves, a major contrast from 20 years ago. Nowadays, every franchise employs teams of data nerds just like yourselves in the hopes of finding an advantage that will bring them a World Series. So before I talk about myself, I figured I'd go over at least a few statistical techniques and how they can be specifically applied to baseball. First, one of the biggest uses for statistics is sampling player performances. A baseball season is essentially a sample of a player's games, and we only get around 150 of them per year. While those games do tell us quite a bit about each player, they don't tell us everything. Similar to how if you picked 150 voters and asked them their political preferences, you'd get a solid idea of the political preferences of the population, but there'd still be a lot of unknown. In baseball, if there's a player who has a 30% chance of getting a hit every time he goes to bat, it's possible that over a 150 game season, he gets a hit 35% of the time, or he gets a hit 27% of the time, which is a massive difference. And we need to figure out what their true talent level is based off of what we know about how they did in that one particular season. So once we have a good estimate of a player's true talent level, we need to project them going forward. The difficult part about projecting athletes is that their true talent level is always changing based on many factors, the biggest of which is age. If we know that a free agent player is average when he's 27 years old, and we want to consider offering him a 5-year contract, how should we project his performance to change as he gets older? In addition, teams grapple with optimization problems all the time once their team is assembled. You have 9 hitters in the lineup, but in what way should they be ordered so that your team scores as many runs as possible? Or where should my team play 3 outfielders so that they can get as many fly balls as possible? Or which pitcher would be the best one to put in against the opposing team's next 3 hitters? For years, these questions were answered by a coach who trusted his or her feel of the situation. Now, with so much data available, managers delegate these questions to people who can find a definitive best answer. Another important use of data in baseball is in detecting injuries. With the StatCast system that I mentioned earlier, we have coordinates for where every player is during the entire game. We can use this data to see how fast a player is running or throwing, or how fast their reaction time is. If a player is suddenly throwing 3 miles per hour slower than his average, his managers will know right away so they can monitor a potential injury and take him out before it gets worse. Biomechanics data is also being used ever increasingly by coaches during their practices. There are systems that can monitor body movement during a pitch or during a swing, and after just a few samples, be able to look for slight flaws or wastes of energy that can be easily fixed to improve player performance. Just like in other fields, while use of data science can be overwhelmingly positive, there are still always ethical concerns. Baseball is no different. I put identifying patterns as my last bullet point here, and while usually identifying patterns is very important, some teams have taken it a little bit too far. This past offseason, for example, a story recently broke about how the Houston Astros used machine learning techniques to watch what signs the catcher was giving his pitcher, figure out what pitch it was, and pass the information on to the hitter all in seconds before the pitcher threw the pitch. The hitter would know what pitch was coming, which is a massive advantage and also illegal. And so data is overwhelmingly used ethically in baseball, but there will always be people who try and get as big of an edge as possible, no matter what the rules say. So now that I've given a brief summary of why data science and baseball have a massive overlap, I'll talk about myself, why I want to make it my career, and what I've done so far. If you're interested in learning more about stats, I'll include some resources at the end, and you can go to them and learn more about it. Definitely would recommend it. So I was born in Buffalo Grove, Illinois, which is a northern suburb of Chicago. Both my parents and much of my extended family are big baseball fans, so Cubs and White Sox games were always on my TV as long as I can remember. I signed up for T-ball when I was old enough and enjoyed every opportunity I could to play ball with my friends. My dad coached my Little League teams, and with that became the first exposure I had to baseball stats. While Little League baseball is just for fun, coaches were required to keep like the basic stats for their players so that every year when the draft came up and all the teams were chosen, all of the other coaches knew how good each of the players that they didn't know were. So after each game, we'd go home and enter in all of the new data from our last game. Maybe like a 1 for 3 for me, a 3 for 3 with a double for my friend, etc. And the spreadsheet would update with all of the statistics after each game for the season. Math was my favorite subject growing up, so seeing all these operations being used on baseball stats was really cool and served as kind of an introduction to Excel and therefore kind of data science. We'd look up formulas for advanced statistics that teams used and add them into our own spreadsheet to find things like, hey, if I put up these numbers at the major league level, I'd be looking at an $18 million contract. Or, hey, I know this player isn't the fastest or the most athletic, but he draws a lot of walks and gets on base a lot. So maybe he should bat leadoff next game instead of 7th. So while the stakes were low, this was data science and baseball coming together for me at a really young age. I started collecting baseball cards, trying to interpret the numbers on the back, like the one I showed earlier, watching games to try and understand all of the statistics that the broadcasters mentioned, and played fantasy baseball leagues with my friends to put my knowledge to the test. In 2009, I went with my dad and my grandpa to the White Sox versus Rays game. Little did we know when we arrived, it would be a historical game, with White Sox pitcher Mark Buehrle throwing just the 18th perfect game in the history of the sport, so he didn't allow a base runner for all 9 innings. It was also the first time that I kept score at a baseball game. You can see the scorecard to the right of your screen. And while I didn't really appreciate the significance of that game as an 8-year-old because I didn't really know what was going on, looking back at it, I realized how cool it was that I was there. A year later, the movie Moneyball came out about the story I told earlier, and it was about the the A's story I told earlier. And it was very fascinating to watch because it showed how teams were using data to help their team win. And it made me want to become one of those people in the movie who can do so. At the end of middle school, I discovered the website baseballreference.com, which turned out to be one of the biggest baseball databases available on the internet. You can search for any of the 20,000 players in baseball history and instantly pull up detailed statistics, game logs, and stories. It also has this incredibly powerful tool that allows you to query their database to look to answer very specific questions. If I want to know how many players have ever gotten 200 hits and 40 home runs in a season, all I need to do is type it in and press search, and it would spit it out for me like the picture shows. If I wanted to know who the best pitcher was in night games that took place outside, I could do that too. All you needed was a question you wanted answered, and there was a pretty good chance that if you knew what to plug in and what settings to check, you could come up with an answer. So what good does this information do if no one is going to hear about it? Sure, if I find an interesting stat, I might tell one of my friends who would like pretend to be interested and like say like, oh, like that's so cool. But like in the end, it was a really fascinating fun fact that was kind of just going to waste. So my freshman year of high school, I decided to make a Twitter page to put out all of these fun facts I came across so that other baseball fans could read them. I knew there'd be some interest. Like I said earlier, kids and adults alike love baseball cards, the stats in the back of them, and a lot of them played fantasy baseball. So I figured there'd be at least be some other baseball fans who love statistics out there. I called my page MLB Random Stats, pretty fittingly because my tweets are just random stats about MLB that I came across. And so on the screen are a few of my first tweets from when I was 14. I made my account October 2015, so pretty much 5 years ago next month. They weren't really like great stats. I didn't really get much traction. No one really saw them at first, but as I tweeted more, I got more and more eyes on my tweets. So Twitter kind of works like a positive feedback loop. The main button on Twitter is like the retweet button. I'm sure a lot of you guys use Twitter. And so when you press the retweet button, the tweet you retweet will show up to all of your followers. So when you don't have many followers, you don't have many people out there that are going to retweet your tweets. So it's really hard to get eyes on your tweets initially. But eventually, I got a few followers who'd retweet my tweets here and there, showing all my tweets to their friends who would follow and retweet to their friends. So growing on Twitter is hard at first, but once you gain a decent following, like I said, it's kind of the opposite. As you can see on my ugly graph that I put together in Google Sheets really quickly, the follower growth was really slow at first. It took over a year to get my first 1,000 followers, but now I'm at over 60,000 followers. And if I'm regularly tweeting baseball stats, I usually expect to gain 100 followers a day. And over the last month, I'm averaging nearly 1 million views on my tweets per day, and that number keeps growing. So I pretty much have 4 things I tweet about. And like before you all laugh at me for how in depth I'll get about tweeting, they asked me to make this 30 minutes about myself and what I do. So I guess I'm just going to go into a lot of detail about it. One in the top left is just like the fun facts that I tweet out when I'm watching a game. So the way I see it, if you look hard enough during a baseball game, something interesting and new happens during each one. So for example, when I saw that Trent Grisham hit his 3rd home run of the game, I looked to see what I could find for that. He was hitting in the first spot of the batting order, which usually is reserved for players who don't hit many home runs, so this was probably pretty rare. In fact, I learned after I searched it up on Baseball Reference that this was the first time in nearly 25 years that the San Diego Padres had their leadoff hitter hit 3 home runs in the game. And that's like over 4,000 games worth of information, and it's the first time in 23 years that it's ever happened. So I tweeted it out. People found it interesting. They shared it with their friends, and the stat was even read off later in the game on the TV broadcast for all the fans to hear. So during the offseason, these tweets are kind of hard to come by because there's no new baseball games going on. So I'll talk a lot about interesting performances that I might have missed from the last season, or just from anything that happened in the 150-year baseball history prior. So while I find those pretty interesting, it's far from uses of data in baseball that I mentioned earlier. Like this piece of information wouldn't really benefit the Padres organization to know. It wouldn't really help their team win more baseball games by knowing this fun fact. So my second kind of tweet is kind of more up that alley. For example, in the top right, I got each player's ground ball percentage from last year and for this year, and I wanted to see the biggest changes from year to year. Generally, players with low ground ball rates will have lower batting averages, but hit for more home runs and generally become more valuable. So this piece of information could be useful to organizations. And there are a few interesting names on the list. You might recognize him if you're baseball fans. If not, don't worry. But Dan Vogelbach, for example, he's the player with the highest increase. And he got released from his baseball team just days after I sent out the tweet. And so it was not the tweet that caused his release. I hope not. But it does show that his team was looking at similar information that I was and determined that this big change in his ground ball percentage was really hurting his performance. And so Matt Chapman, on the other end, at negative 18.4%, was the biggest decrease in the entire league. And recently, probably a few weeks after I sent out the tweet, was recently discovered to have been playing the entire season with a hip injury and got season-ending surgery. So it's possible his massive changes in underlying statistics could have been a huge warning sign that something was up, going back to what I was talking about with outlier detection earlier in injury concerns. So my third tweet, which is at the bottom, kind of just reserved for my opinions. I find it funny that once you gain a lot of followers on Twitter, people like think you have a reputable opinion just because I tweet out baseball stats. So a lot of people ask me for my opinion. They definitely find it fascinating for some reason, but it's pretty cool. And then my fourth kind of tweet, I didn't put them on here, but they're my attempts at making like really bad jokes. I didn't put them on here because the humor is really niche. You only really understand it if you like watch baseball a ton. But I promise some people do find them funny, but I didn't put them on here. So my most successful tweet was a stat I put out in 2018. It was about Reds first baseman Joey Votto and how he never ever pops out. So if you know baseball, you know how absurd this fact is on the left. But if you don't, the last sentence kind of adds a little bit of context. So popping out in baseball is pretty much a wasted at bat where a hitter hits it really high into the air, but the ball doesn't go very far. And it's pretty much a guaranteed catch by the infielders. So most players, it happens to once in a while on accident if they miss time a pitch or miss the pitch by an inch or whatever. Except for Votto. Over the 9-year span in the tweet that on the left, Votto popped out just 7 times. And the average player does it roughly twice that each season. And a lot of people found that really cool. Joey Votto was trending on Twitter the next morning when I woke up. As you can see, I tweeted at midnight my time. And so when I woke up the next morning, he was trending on Twitter. I found literally like a dozen articles about people finding how interesting the stat was. There was like an article in Barstool about it. It was pretty funny. I gained a lot of followers from it. And now if you go and ask like a random baseball fan who uses Twitter a lot, if they know about Joey Votto's pop-ups, there's a pretty decent chance they'll know what you're talking about, which is pretty cool. So as my account began to grow more and more, I realized that I could kind of use it as a way to get into the baseball industry at a young age. A lot of people in baseball knew who I was. My followers, besides fans, included players, coaches, writers, and announcers. I also had a ton of statistics over my few years of being on Twitter, many of which were really relevant to the history of baseball, not really the future of baseball. So I messaged one of my friends on Twitter who is also very interested in baseball stats, and I asked if he wanted to write a book. The idea was we would start at the beginning of Major League Baseball in 1876 and go year by year and write about each of the fun things that happened in every year. So like I kind of thought about it like, what would I be tweeting about if I was alive in 1884 and Twitter was around? So we do hours of research about each season and kind of just jot down notes and eventually turn them into a more coherent paragraphs about baseball stats just for each year we could find. So our goal was to try and tell a story about the history of baseball using easily understandable fun facts, like kind of things that we would tweet out. At first, we were going to put every year in one book, but we realized pretty quickly that it was going to be way too long, so we split it up into 3 different sections. The first one is the red book. It goes from 1876 to 1919. I actually have it here. And the second book, the blue one, which I also have here, goes from 1920 to 1969. And the third one, which I don't have here because I'm still writing it right now, goes from 1970 to the present. So book 1 ended up being like 230 pages, and book 2 ended up being around 270. Book 3 probably closer to 300 just because of how much more information we have for those recent seasons. So we published the books through Kindle Direct Publishing, or KDP, and they're available on Amazon if you want to buy them. Definitely buy them if you want. They've been a really cool way to do something like really interesting and make money off of it too, which I really couldn't do before just based off of my Twitter. The problem is I'm not really a great writer. I'm more of a math person. So while I did write a couple of books and various websites pay me to write articles for them, it's definitely not where I see myself going in the future. The first book, the red one, was published while I was senior in high school, and the second one came out during like the early days of quarantine. I think maybe like May this year. So So coming out of high school, I knew I wanted to study something related to math. I took a few computer science classes in high school, and while I didn't really mind it, I didn't really see myself being more of like a software engineer. Just wasn't really my thing. So I discovered that data science was an actual major that existed, so I looked more into it. And the one at Purdue really intrigued me. I grew up a Purdue Boilermaker fan. My dad was an actuarial science major here, and between the awesome connections you can make, the great professors here, and I really like the college town feel, Purdue ended up being the place for me. Like I said, I'm a sophomore in data science right now, so if you care, I'm taking Stat 242, 355, and 416. I'm also taking Micro and American Studies 320, understanding the NFL, which is pretty fun. So well, I did have a decent amount of experience working with baseball data coming in. A lot of what I've learned in my classes so far has been very helpful. If you want to work for a pro sports team or many other fields in data science, most people I've heard say it's really important to know Python and or R, and it's really nice that the courses I'm taking here really cater to that kind of need. So making my Twitter account 5 years ago ended up being a much bigger decision for me than I thought at the time. Over the last couple of years, I've had a lot of stories written about me. I got featured in a news segment in CBS TV Chicago. It was really cool, like watching myself on TV. And I got interviewed on ESPN during a baseball game this summer, which is really cool. You can see in the bottom left. There's me and two of the announcers for the game. So that was really cool. It was a fun summer being like in all these articles. There's like a Purdue Exponent article about me. I think Purdue wrote one too about me, which was really awesome. And it's been really cool. So also here at school, I've had some cool opportunities come up. I joined the sports analytics club here at Purdue last year and became the vice president. And we do a lot of cool things over there. Baseball isn't really your thing, but you do enjoy other sports. I definitely would recommend coming to one of our meetings, or if you do like baseball, that works well as well. So I'll put I think I have the link in the comments right now, but I also have it at the end of the slideshow. If you want to join, just come to one of our meetings, join our group me, and we'd love to have you. So what's next for me? Data science was the ideal major for me to eventually work with a baseball team one day, but I'm not sure if that's what I'll want to do straight out of school. The sports data industry is ridiculously competitive. I'm sure some of you know that if you're interested in going into it. It has crazy hours and honestly pretty low pay compared to other opportunities that I might have as a data science major. A couple years ago, I was able to take a tour of the Cincinnati Reds front office and talk to some people there. And while all of them do love what they do, there definitely are a lot of sacrifices that need to be made to work for a team. I do have a couple of years to decide whether or not that's the path for me or not, but if it's not, all you guys know that data science is really applicable in pretty much any field, and I'm really interested in it, so I'm sure I could find great options, whether in baseball or not. I'm not like anxious about my future or anything because I know this data science degree from Purdue is going to get me a long way. So like I mentioned earlier, I would put some useful data sites and sources for baseball statistics. So here they are. Baseball Reference, Fangraphs. Baseball Savant is the StatCast database. So they have like everything. Like it's really crazy how much information they have. You can look for pretty much anything you want on there. RetroSheet is a cool database for historical stats. Baseball Prospectus has a lot of advanced stuff on there. The Layman database, and then 538 does a lot of politics stuff, but they also have some cool baseball information on there too. And then if you're interested in learning more about baseball stats and you want to read more about them, here are some good books. I didn't include mine because mine don't really tell you much about actual like how baseball stats work in baseball. It's just kind of just the historical side of it. But these books that I listed here are really good reads if you want to like see how data science is really applied in front offices. They have really good interviews with people in them and really to show kind of how hands-on and like how connected data science could be with baseball. And so if you want to contact me or reach me or follow me, my Twitter is MLB Random Stats. My Instagram, if you want to follow me there, is Jeremy._. My LinkedIn, Sports Analytics are both in the comments. If you want to go to either of those links and connect with me or join the Sports Analytics Club, we'd love to have you. And then my books are called Hidden Ball Trick, the baseball stats you never thought to look for. There are two of them out right now. If you're interested, definitely recommend purchasing. I read them, they're pretty good. But yeah, I really appreciate you guys all coming and listening to me talk. And that's all I have for you guys. So I think we're doing questions now.
Thank you very much. Yes, if you have questions for Jeremy, please feel free to type them into the chat window, or you can just unmute yourself when there's an opening and you can ask out loud. While we're waiting for the questions, I have a couple questions for you, Jeremy. First of
For
all,
sure.
now that you're in the data science program at Purdue, you're a year and a little bit in. What have you learned in your classes so far that have helped you to do more sophisticated analyses?
Yeah, so last year, as a freshman, I really didn't do too much just because they were all like intro stuff like Calc 3, linear algebra, all that stuff. Definitely important to know, just not really important for me to know with baseball stuff. But this year, my CS 242 and 355 have been really good. We haven't even gone that far into the class, but I've already become a lot more comfortable using like Python and R. Before I got here, most of the stuff I did was just in Excel, and I could easily pass it by. I know that's kind of like frowned upon as you get further into data science, but it did work. But now Python and R, I've become really comfortable with just doing the homeworks and projects for those kind of classes. So it's been, I think that's been the key thing I've learned so far, and I'm really excited the next couple years to just keep improving my skills in those.
Is there something that you want to analyze, but you felt like you haven't been able to yet, maybe because you didn't have the skills or you didn't have access to the data? What would you really like to be able to analyze?
Yes, so I'll actually go. So Baseball Savant, the website I was talking about with a ton of data, there's a lot of stuff on there that you can search on the website, but some of the things on there, if you want to like look for really like detailed research questions, you need to like export that into like Excel or whatever. The problem is like these spreadsheets are literally like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lines long. So in Excel, you can't really do that in a quick manner because it just takes forever. It's kind of hard to keep it organized. So I think doing stuff with that kind of information going forward is going to be a lot easier when I have more tools that allow me to analyze big data easier.
So for data miners, that's why we use Scholar, for example, because it allows us to work with data sets that are big like that. Um, so is there a research question that you have in mind that you would love to be able to look into?
I think really important, a really like interesting thing to me is like with injuries. I think they have a lot of databases with when specifically guys got put on like the injured list. So like you can find when guys got hurt, what their exact injury was, and I think it'd be interesting to kind of see what if there was anything that pointed to it in the last like week or two before their injury that could have shown that that was potentially like obviously some things like a torn ACL might be unpredictable, but with like pitchers and they have like constant pain going into their arms, like I think that could be pretty noticeable. So I think you kind of put those two kind of data sets together and kind of really look to see if there's any correlation or anything between different metrics and if they're going to get hurt or not.
Now, for a lot of football teams, both college and professional, they've got all kinds of biometric devices on them while they're practicing or playing, and then they're collecting
Yep.
that data and analyzing. Is baseball doing that too?
Yeah, baseball does it in like practices and stuff, and like so there's this really cool company. It's called Driveline, and they kind of do what you just mentioned about football, but with baseball, they put sensors on their pitchers, and they kind of just have them throw like a bullpen session, maybe like 50 pitches or whatever, or 30 pitches, and they have all of the information for where their pitches ended up, how fast they were going, and you can also see where pretty much all of their like limbs were at every single split second during their delivery. So you can really kind of check to see like, oh, this pitcher threw a pitch that missed the plate by 4 feet. What did they do? What was the slight difference in their delivery that you want to correct for and make sure that you can kind of make it more consistent as you go on. So they do that, especially for pitchers. They do it a little bit for hitters too. There's a lot of swing mechanics that you can look at. So yeah, teams are doing this, especially the last few years. And the Statcast that they have in all of the ballparks, they now track players like they don't track like all of their like they don't have like sensors on the players, but they can track like their knees and their feet and stuff. So I guess they have like different like points on the body that they can track pretty well because the cameras are like ridiculously high definition.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what happens in the sports analytics club? What kinds of projects or activities do you have?
Yeah, so we meet every week on usually Wednesdays at 7:30 at Weatherall 200, and we do a variety of different things. We tailor the people with no experience in analytics. It's just a lot of people are interested in their feet wet. We think it's a great opportunity, but we have stuff like watch parties for Purdue sports. We have trivia nights. We do have projects. We're doing this thing semester. It's kind of like a science fair kind of thing where the students, if they want to, completely optional, can do a project with sports data on their own time, and then at the end of the semester are going to end up presenting it to the group as like just like a cool side project. It's really good. Sports teams look for just any projects that you did on your own time when they're looking at applicants for jobs. So it's kind of a good thing for people to listen to other people's ideas and also get people experience. Um, we just have a lot of we just do different things every single week. You don't have to come every week if you don't think the thing is interesting. We have guest speakers too. Last year we had some really cool people. We had the White Sox announcer, and we also had an MLB pitcher who's from Lafayette. So he came by. It was really cool to talk to people who are like actually in not like on the data side of things, but also like how they use the data as professionals and how they use it to improve. So we do a lot of different fun things. Every meeting is different. So if you don't enjoy one of them or don't think we're talking about maybe soccer, like our guest speaker is a soccer person and you don't like soccer, don't come. That's fine. I probably wouldn't go to that one either, but would definitely recommend if you're interested in any of the things I mentioned.
This semester, with so many students living across the world because of the pandemic, is there any way for students who are not here on campus to be able to participate?
Yeah, so I like I said the meetings are 7:30 at Weatherall, but we also have a Zoom meeting like on the computer at Weatherall. So if you can't attend, you can also Zoom in, which is works just as fine. It's not like the full experience, but you can like put in the chat if you have something to say, or just like whatever. You can do either one if you want to go there in person, or if you're not feeling like going in person, or if you're not actually at school, you can Zoom in. And we also for the guest speakers we post the recordings after. So.
That's great. Thank you. Just a reminder, you're welcome to post your questions in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask out loud. Okay, so another question, you were mentioning that the front office jobs or other types of jobs involved with sports. If you could design your own job, what would it be?
So it's actually funny you asked that. So I was, like I mentioned, I was in Cincinnati talking to some people that work with the Reds, and there was this one guy that had a really interesting job that I think I'd be like really interested in. So you have those people that are really really good at like coding and using data like to like answer questions, and so they do all that stuff. And then you have the coaches who are their job is to pretty much communicate that information to the players. The problem is a lot of it's really hard to get that information from the people who are like coding and doing all the data work to the coaches. So they have this one person who's like really well versed in data analytics in baseball and also like has spent their whole life like watching baseball, knows baseball really well. So he's kind of like the middle ground, like almost like a translator between the people who are really good at answering questions and the people who are kind of tasked to put those answers into play. So that kind of he does like just kind of a mix of everything, and it was really interesting. That would totally be something that I'd be interested in because I feel like I know baseball really well, and I also really understand the data aspect of it. So I feel like I'd be kind of a good middle ground communicator between the people who are like I said, looking for answers, and the people who can actually put those answers into play.
So a question came in. What type of work do you look for? This follows up on that question. Do you want to join a particular organization or do you want to keep working on personal projects with data science?
Yeah, so it would be really cool out of college if I could end up working for a team with like an organization. I could also see myself working with like a ESPN kind of thing where because if you watch baseball games, they have like stats that come up during the game, just like more of the stuff that I would tweet about, like fun facts. And I mean, someone has to find them, so those jobs do exist too. So that's kind of different than actually working with the team because the team is much more like down in the data, like getting that information to help the team. Whereas um, ESPN would be like more of like an entertainment role, more of what I do now. I could totally see myself doing either one of those things for sure. Also, I would not be opposed to just going into data science, like not in sports, and keeping what I do now, like with my books and my Twitter, keep that running on the side because I definitely enjoy doing it too.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, I don't see anything else coming in at the moment. Type fast, or at least, let us know questions coming if you want. But yeah, this has been so interesting. I didn't realize how much data analysis could change the way that baseball operates.
Yeah, I can actually show you like one of the websites I think is really cool.
Please do. Please do.
I'll have some extra time. So like there's this website, Baseball Savant, is really cool. They have like a lot of stuff on here. So like they have this thing called the Illustrator. I like this website's really cool. So you like enter a player's name, um, and you can kind of just like mess around with all this stuff here. And like really is really cool for data visualizations. You don't need to know how to do anything. You just like press check off these boxes and
Wow.
stuff, and it really kind of it's really powerful. And then also like for each game, if there's a game going on right now, all of this data comes in live for the games. So they have all of this like the exit velocities, launch angles for everything going on, which is really cool because like literally right when it happens, it goes into this database. Um, they also have just a ton of so much, like literally so much stuff here. Like you can go to like a player's um, page and it shows just a ton of really cool data visualizations that
Wow.
I guess their thing kind of puts together. Um, it's like a lot of people like don't understand like how much data in baseball like there actually is because like you kind of just why it's like a sport like you really don't see like a lot of math people doing oops doing sports stuff but there's so much stuff here that you can find if you're interested in so teams use this kind of stuff fans don't really think it goes um, it's too much into play but it actually really is like this stuff is all really there's just so much information available which makes it really cool. Here's like their database. You can search for a bunch of stuff here. And
Is there any controversy at all about this massive use of data to play the game of baseball rather than just going out and playing the game? Do people
yeah,
object?
yeah. So a lot of like fans, baseball is like an older fan base. Like they do get young people watching, but it's one of those sports where like you'll find most of their fan base is like 40 to 70-year-old guys. Which is like I guess how some other sports are too. But those a lot of people are not really open to like they just want to watch the games and like whatever, and like that's fine. There's nothing stopping people from watching the games. A lot of them are like against teams using this kind of data and stuff, but I don't think they realize that if every team if there was one team that decided not to use data to improve their team, no matter they could be talented and they wouldn't win games just because of how important it is and how many teams use it at this point. That a team deciding just we're not going to use it is just like I talked about like the arms race earlier. Once one team started hiring these guys and girls, there have been so many teams that have hired teams of data scientists just because they really don't want to fall behind. Because I mean, it could be the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. Even if all your players stay the same, just those people who are kind of doing this stuff, and they have like you like press on a player here, and it like pulls up videos, like just of any play you come across. So just anything you want to search, you can find videos of, all the visualizations too. So I think that stuff is pretty cool. But yeah,
There has to be an army of statisticians or data scientists behind this particular website. I would think. Have you considered
yeah,
working for a group like this or other social media platforms or just being a reporter?
yeah. So it's actually interesting. This is actually run through MLB. I think MLB does a really good job of putting all this information out there. So they have like a team of maybe like 6 or 7 people. I actually know a lot of them just from Twitter and stuff. They're pretty active online. But I could not imagine how much work went into to putting this stuff. Like here's like a pitch chart, and you can like press any of these pitches, and it like pulls up a video of it. Just like it's remarkable how much work went into this, and like every single team has stuff like this that were created by their own people. Like this is just public stuff. Teams have so much more than this to work with because they get so much more information than is public. Just because of how, like if you think of baseball, it's a billion-dollar industry. They're not going to give all of the data they have to just the random fan. They give a lot of it just to teams and stuff like that. So I mean, if we have all of this stuff, it's crazy to think about how much information that like teams have to work with.
Hmm. Do you know
Yeah.
what they're using to make all of this?
I'm not. They use some. It's like it's called. It was Statcast, and now it's called Hawkeye, and it's like some like radar technology thing. I don't understand how it works. It's not really my thing. Um, so it's operated by teams, and it's just really like they have them in all the stadiums, and they're just really high like resolution cameras that
Hmm.
do it. I guess it's like I think they use like a Doppler radar too for it. It's kind of crazy,
Hmm.
but they used it for tennis too for to determine if the ball's in or out. I don't know if you've seen tennis when they like if someone challenges a call to see if the ball was like on the line or not, and then they go to like the animation where it shows like how close the ball was. They use that for that too. It's just really quick, real time stuff. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure how it works. To be honest, they use optical tracking sensors, cloud infrastructure from Google Cloud. If that means anything to anyone here, maybe you can look into doing this stuff. But there's like a lot of physics stuff, like this article says. There's a lot of people who work in like physicists, like what like professors, like work a lot with MLB stuff because a baseball game is really just a really massive physics problem. So if you can figure that out, you have a good idea of what's going on.
Well, this is fascinating.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Like you wouldn't think of like I was talking about earlier, like they used to just have baseball cards with like the stats in the back. And like that used to be a lot of information. And now you can just look this up for like any player you want, any team you want. Is just all of this stuff is here. So teams use this. Also another interesting use for this is like if you go to like a go back to a hitter and I was kind of mentioning this earlier. I don't know where this would necessarily be. Um, or wait, actually, it would probably be here. But what teams do, I'll find a good example here, is they'll like have this like Matt Olson, and he's a lefty, so he hits the ball a lot to the right side of the field. And so if you go to like his, where would this even be? His batted ball chart, he hits the ball a lot to this side of the field and very rarely to this side of the field. So if you're a baseball team, you're going to want to put all your defenders or a lot of your defenders on this side because he's more likely to hit it there. So basically, what teams are doing now, before it was like you'd have like before the inning, you tell them like, oh, this guy's going to come up, maybe stand a little bit further to this side because he's going to probably hit it there. Now all the teams print out like cheat sheets, like note cards that has this for every single player on the other team. And so the players will pull it out before the guy comes up to bat and it'll tell them exactly where to stand. It's like it used to be like 20 years ago, the players kind of just stood wherever and that was kind of it. But now you know Matt Olson's going to hit this ball here a lot. So there's a good chance that you should probably stand there.
How many hours a week are you spending working on this?
Since I got back to school, it's been a lot less than over the summer. I mean, I just watch a lot of baseball. So if baseball game's on in the background and I hear something interesting happen, I'll like look and maybe tweet something out. I'm on Twitter a lot, also way too much. And if people are tweeting about something that I might be interesting, then I'll look to see. I'll look at that game, look at the box score, and see if it was actually an interesting thing that I might tweet about. But a lot of it's just being online way too much and having baseball games on way too much. But I do make sure I get time done for my school stuff as well. You can
Well,
also share these. I don't know why they do this, but you can like share them on like Snapchat if you wanted to. If you
hmm.
ever want to post this really cool thing on your Snapchat story, um, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Hmm.
So like, I could not imagine how much time went into making this website. They just have so much stuff on here, but this is something you'd be doing if you were a data scientist for a baseball team or for MLB themselves.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing all of this. This has been really interesting, and I'm sure you're going to get some new recruits for your sports analytics club too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. Join the group me for sure. That's where we post all of our club information. I know like there's like a club website. We like it's not really we don't really use it that well. So join the group me. It's in the um
If you scroll
comments or
back up in
whatever.
the chat, you'll be able to find it. And we're also hoping to post the recording for you if you need to go back and look at that too.
Cool. Yeah, so join the group me. Come to a meeting. If you don't think it's interesting, then it's fine. Don't come to any more meetings. I won't be offended. But if it is up your alley, definitely consider sticking around. You don't have to come to any meetings if you don't want to, but if there's something interesting happens, I also post about meetings on Twitter. So like if we have a guest speaker coming that you might have heard of, I'll post about that. I made a lot of really cool connections. I try and get a lot of them to like talk to the club. The problem is most of them are baseball people, and not everyone in the club is a baseball person. So I kind of have to balance what would be cool for me versus what would be cool for the other 100 people in the club. So
Well, thank you very much. I hope the rest of your semester goes really well, and we look forward to following your progress.
cool. Thank you so much. Thanks guys for listening. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks to all the students for your questions and for your attention. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.